In a remote and sun-scorched village near the river Taba, Amina lived a quiet and obedient life. She was known for her beauty, but even more so for her gentle spirit, often likened to a river flower, soft, overlooked, and deeply rooted. Life hadn't been kind to her. Her father, once the village's beloved healer, had passed away when she was still a child. With him gone, the warmth in her home vanished, replaced by the cold rule of her new stepmother, Rukia. Rukia was a proud and bitter woman who brought her own daughter, Kessa, into the household. From the beginning, Rukia favoured Kessa, dressing her in bright fabrics, adorning her with jewellery, and allowing her to enjoy the luxuries Amina was never permitted to touch. Amina, on the other hand, became the house labourer, carrying water from the river, sweeping dusty floors, and cooking meals she barely got to eat. Despite her hardship, Amina remained kind. She never raised her voice or spoke back. Instead, she found peace in simple things, like singing to the birds at dawn, or placing wildflowers on her father's old wooden shrine. During the village's grand Palm Day festival, where traders came from distant lands and music filled the air, a strange visitor arrived. He was a blind beggar, hunched over and wrapped in ragged cloth. His eyes were pale and clouded, and he leaned heavily on a carved wooden staff. As he wandered into the village square, laughter followed him. Children threw stones, men scoffed, and women whispered. Amina, walking back from the market, saw him seated under the old baobab tree. Without hesitation, she knelt and gently handed him half of her roasted maize cake. The beggar remained silent, but gave a slow, deliberate nod, his expression unreadable. From the shadow of a palm stall, Rukia watched with narrowed eyes and a twisted smile forming on her lips. That night, her cruel voice floated through the walls as Amina lay on her mat, pretending to sleep. "If she loves feeding beggars," Rukia hissed, "let her live with one." Just days after the festival, Rukia made a shocking declaration. Without any discussion or warning, she announced Amina's engagement to the same blind beggar who had wandered into the village. She spun the story to the village elders, claiming Amina had fallen for him out of pity and insisted on marrying him. The elders, bound by tradition and uninterested in Amina's protests, agreed. Word spread like wildfire. Villagers gossiped that Amina had disgraced her family, that her strange kindness had become her downfall. Amina was powerless to stop it. She cried alone at night, praying to her late father's spirit, begging for a way out. But no one came. Even her childhood friends avoided her, afraid to speak against Rukia's command. Her stepsister Kessa gloated daily, making cruel jokes about the beggar's bride. The wedding was rushed, quiet, and joyless. Amina wore a faded dress that had once belonged to a village widow. As she stood under the elder tree for the ceremony, her eyes were swollen from crying. Kessa stood nearby, grinning proudly in silk. The blind beggar, oddly composed, said little throughout the vows. His presence was calm, almost too calm, as if he knew more than he let on. Amina didn't look at him once. After the ceremony, the newlyweds were taken to a dilapidated hut on the edge of the village, by the river's bend, a place long abandoned and whispered to be cursed. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and sorrow. Amina curled up in a corner, refusing food, her body wrapped in a thin, tattered cloth. The beggar stood near the door in silence for hours. Then, in a low, even voice, he broke the silence. "Do you fear me, Amina?" he asked. She didn't flinch. Her voice came softly. "No. I fear what they've done to us both." That night, as moonlight streamed through the cracks in the hut's roof, the silence inside grew heavy, thick with questions and quiet tension. Amina lay curled in the corner, her eyes half closed, when the sound of shifting feet broke the stillness. The beggar stood up slowly, his movements calm but deliberate. Without a word, he reached up and untied the cloth that had been wrapped around his eyes. Amina watched, unsure what he was doing, until his face turned toward her fully. The foggy white in his eyes began to shimmer, and in seconds, the dull haze transformed into a vibrant emerald green, bright and piercing, glowing like river stones kissed by sunlight. She gasped and sat up straight. For the first time, he was looking directly at her. No searching, no fumbling, only clarity. "I can see now," he said, his voice deeper, stronger, and filled with calm power. Amina's heart pounded. What are you?" she whispered. The air itself responded. A gentle breeze stirred the walls of the hut, and the sound of the nearby river grew louder, as if listening. Vines began curling out of wall cracks, and small white flowers bloomed along the floor. The entire hut seemed to breathe with new life. The man bowed before her. "My name is Prince Balu of Kundanji," he said with regal grace. "My sight was taken from me by treachery. I wore silence as armor, but now the time has come to speak." He explained how a jealous uncle had blinded and banished him, casting a curse. He would remain unseen and powerless until someone, without knowing his truth, showed him love without reason. Amina had broken that curse when she gave him food, asking nothing in return. "Your hands fed me," he said, stepping closer. "But it was your soul that freed me." Prince Balu sat close to Amina, his voice steady and deep, the glow still faint in his eyes. He began to share the truth buried beneath years of suffering. He had once been the rightful heir to the kingdom of Kundanji, a land nestled in the highlands where waterfalls carved paths through emerald forests. But on the eve of his coronation, his uncle, driven by envy, poisoned him with sacred herbs used only in rare rituals. The herbs blinded Balu, not only stealing his sight, but binding him with a magical curse. The same night, the uncle declared Balu dead and seized the throne. Wounded and exiled, Balu was guided by a mysterious old forest priestess who found him at the edge of death. She healed his body, but not his eyes. Instead, she gave him a prophecy. "You shall walk unseen through kingdoms. You shall live as less than dust until one offers you light, without knowing who you are. When you are loved while being nothing, only then shall you rise as all." For years, Balu roamed the lands in disguise. He wore dirt like a second skin and silence like a shield. He had nearly given up when his seers showed him a vision of Amina's face reflected in water, a girl with sorrow in her eyes and gold in her soul. So, he went to her village, disguised himself as a blind beggar, and waited. "But I needed to know," he said gently, "if your kindness would still bloom when it was not seen, praised, or rewarded." Amina stared, her breath shallow. "So, all of this, you knew?" Balu nodded solemnly. "Because I saw your heart before I saw your face." Tears welled in her eyes. A beggar was a prince, and she, a discarded daughter, was now a queen chosen by fate. Balu lowered his head once more. "I do not ask for loyalty out of duty, only love, if it truly lives in you." Amina reached for his hand, her voice a whisper full of power. "Then let the truth speak loud." As dawn painted the sky with streaks of gold, a strange, thunderous sound rolled through the village. Drums, rhythmic, royal, and rising. From the hills came a procession unlike any the villagers had seen in years. Golden chariots gleamed under the sun. Soldiers dressed in bronze armor marched with spears raised. At the center rode Prince Balu, no longer cloaked in rags, but adorned in flowing robes, his serpent emblem crown shining. Beside him stood Amina, her presence radiant. She wore golden fabric, embroidered with leaves and stars, her head held high. She was no longer the silent girl who fetched water. She was a queen now, both in spirit and in name. As they entered the heart of the village, mouths fell open. Children pointed in awe. Women clutched their heads. Men lowered their eyes. No one could believe it. The beggar was royalty, and the discarded girl they mocked was his bride. At Amina's home, Rukia stumbled out, confused by the noise. The moment her eyes met Amina's, walking beside the once blind beggar, now a king, her legs gave out. She fell to her knees in disbelief. Kaisa, overwhelmed with fear and shame, fled inside, slamming the door behind her. The village elder approached, bowing deeply to the prince. Then, Prince Baloo's voice echoed across the square. I came to your village in rags and blindness. I was kicked, cursed, and laughed at. But one hand fed me. One soul saw me. That soul now wears the crown of Kundanji. Amina stepped forward, facing her trembling stepmother. Her voice was calm but powerful. You threw me away to shame me. But shame is a seed that only grows when watered. I refused to water it. Rukia crawled forward, begging for forgiveness. Kisa sobbed at the doorstep. Prince Baloo raised his hand. Let the elders decide. The village council declared their judgment. Rukia would be banished to the Saltlands, a place where nothing grows, for 3 years. Kesa would be sent to the Temple of Wisdom to learn humility and service. Before they departed, Amina offered both women a parcel of food and a jug of clean water, proof that kindness does not die in power. Even in triumph, she remained who she always was, the girl who fed the forgotten. Amina and Prince Baloo returned to the highlands of Kundanji, where the wind whispered through the trees like an ancient song. The land, once gripped by silence and sorrow during the prince's long exile, now awakened. Trees bloomed with new life. Rivers flowed clearer than ever before. Villagers danced in the streets. The lost prince had returned, not alone, but with a queen who had transformed him. Amina was crowned, not just Queen of Kundanji, but given the sacred title of Mother of Sight. Not for restoring Baloo's vision, but for teaching the entire kingdom to see through kindness, truth, and courage. Instead of resting in the palace, Amina began work on her greatest gift, the Garden of Sight, a sanctuary nestled between the hills and river. It became a place where orphaned girls, abandoned daughters, and poor women came to learn the ancient arts of herbs, storytelling, healing, and above all, self-worth. Etched on the garden gate was the first rule: no one asks what you were, only what you wished to become. Years passed. One night, under the silver glow of a full moon, Amina sat with a circle of little girls around a glowing firefly lantern. She told them her story, not as a queen, but as a girl once forgotten. A curious child looked up and asked, "Was the prince really blind?" Amina smiled warmly. "He was blind to the world, but not to the truth. And truth," she said, "is the only light that never fades." She rose and walked to the garden's heart, where she carefully placed a small glass box. Inside it was the maize cake wrapper she once gave a blind beggar. Beneath it, carved into stone, they gave her to a beggar to shame her, but the beggar gave her back her crown. In the final scene, fireflies float through the night air as Amina and Baloo walk hand in hand through the blooming garden. Two souls who saw each other clearly when no one else did.